For nearly 4 months, Dean Whitfield had ignored every invitation his friend sent. Coffee after work, weekend cookouts, karaoke nights. He always found an excuse. It wasn't that he disliked people. He was simply worn thin from trying to hold life together after his wife passed away. Between raising his 9-year-old daughter, Ivy, and keeping up with a demanding logistics job, he barely had energy left to rinse the dishes before collapsing into bed. Then his friend finally stopped asking him to go out. Instead, she invited him to dinner. He didn't realize until he arrived that it was a blind date. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. The restaurant sat tucked between a bakery and a bookshop on a quiet street in Capitol Hill, Seattle. A light drizzle had just stopped, leaving the pavement glossy under the street lamps. Dean almost turned the car around twice before he found parking. He checked his phone, half hoping his friend would text and cancel. Nothing came. Inside, the smell of rosemary bread and simmering tomato sauce wrapped around him. Sasha was already waiting near the hostess stand, waving with the kind of energy only someone who just finished a 12-hour hospital shift could summon. "You actually showed up." "I almost didn't." "I know." Before Dean could ask why there were 3 chairs at the table instead of 2, a woman rose from her seat. "This is my cousin, Priya." Priya wasn't dressed to turn heads. A soft charcoal cardigan, small silver hoops, dark hair pulled into a loose braid. She looked every bit as uneasy as Dean felt. "So," Dean said, forcing a smile, "this wasn't just dinner." "Nope," Sasha admitted without an ounce of guilt. "You both needed to push out the front door." Dean sighed. "Should have guessed." Sasha grinned. "You'll thank me later." She excused herself minutes later, claiming she had to meet another friend across town, though Dean strongly suspected that friend didn't exist. Now, it was just him and Priya. For almost a full minute, neither reached for a menu. Finally, Priya broke first. "Want to know something embarrassing? I almost canceled twice." That made Dean laugh harder than he expected. The tension in his shoulders loosened. Conversation came slowly, then more easily. Priya managed a community garden program for the city parks department. She loved secondhand bookstores, couldn't stand loud bars, and confessed she'd killed 3 basil plants this year alone despite following every instruction online. "Exactly my luck with anything green," Dean said. Priya laughed, not the polite kind, the real kind. It had been a long time since anyone laughed like that at something Dean said. The waiter brought water, then bread, then appetizers, and for the first time in months, Dean stopped glancing at the clock. Meanwhile, back at the office, things had been anything but peaceful. Dean's department had been under strain ever since the company absorbed a smaller regional freight firm. Deadlines shifted weekly. Budgets tightened by the month. At the center of it all stood Vanessa Cole, VP of Operations, technically Dean's boss. She wasn't unkind. She simply expected everyone to match a pace she never questioned in herself. Emails landed at 5 a.m. Meetings appeared with no warning. She remembered every missed target down to the decimal, but rarely asked how anyone was actually holding up. Even so, Dean respected her. She outworked everyone in the building. He just wished she remembered that most people had someone waiting for them at home. Earlier that same afternoon, Dean had left the office 20 minutes early, not by choice, but because Ivy's teacher had called. A classmate had mocked her for bringing the same lunchbox every day, something Ivy's mother used to pack for her. Ivy hadn't hit anyone, but she cried so hard the nurse had to step in. Dean spent an hour sitting with her on the curb outside school before she was calm enough to go home. He barely made it to dinner on time. He hadn't told Priya any of that yet. Instead, they talked about neighborhood trails, rainy Sunday routines, and movies that had somehow turned into comfort rituals. Then Priya noticed something. "You keep glancing at the door." "Occupational habit, I guess." She smiled. "Expecting someone?" "No." He hesitated. "I think I'm just always expecting work to find me." She let that answer sit without pushing further. The server had just set down their entrees when the front door swung open. Dean glanced up out of pure reflex. His stomach dropped. Walking in was Vanessa. She still wore the same slate-gray blazer from the afternoon's budget meeting, now draped over one arm. Beside her walked another director Dean recognized from the regional office, Apparently, they'd grabbed dinner after a client walked through. Vanessa scanned the room mid-sentence. Then her eyes landed on Dean. Recognition flickered across her face. She gave a small, polite nod. Dean nodded back, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The hostess hurried over, apologetic. "I'm so sorry. We're completely full tonight. Would you mind if these two joined your table for a bit? 15, maybe 20 minutes, until something opens up." Dean froze. Priya blinked in surprise. Before either could answer, Vanessa spoke first. "If it's an inconvenience, we can wait." The hostess looked frazzled. Friday nights ran on controlled chaos in a place this small. "It's fine," Dean said finally. "There's really no other option," Priya added kindly. Within minutes, 2 more place settings appeared. Dean found himself sharing a blind date with his own boss. Nobody had planned for that. The first few minutes were painfully quiet. Forks scraped plates. Glasses clinked. The director beside Vanessa talked at length about a delayed flight. Priya focused intently on her risotto. Dean concentrated very hard on cutting his chicken into unnecessarily small pieces. Finally, Vanessa broke the silence. "I didn't know you were a regular here." "I'm not," Dean admitted. "A friend arranged all this." "Sort of surprise." "You could say that," Priya said, smiling. "Définitivement a surprise." For the first time, Dean saw something unexpected cross Vanessa's face. A real smile, not the practiced one from conference rooms. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, but it had been there. Conversation slowly loosened. Not about work, about Seattle traffic, a bakery 2 blocks over, an old cinema downtown everyone kept insisting deserved saving. Vanessa surprised the table further when she mentioned she tutored twice a month at a youth center near the waterfront. Dean blinked. "You teach math?" "I mostly just sit with them while they figure it out themselves," she corrected. "Kids usually get there if someone's patient enough to wait." That sentence didn't sound like the woman who fired off emails before sunrise. It sounded like someone else entirely. Then Dean's phone buzzed. He apologized before checking it. The message was from his mother, who was watching Ivy that night. "Don't panic. Ivy has a bit of a fever. Gave her medicine. She's resting now." Dean stood immediately. "I'm sorry, I need to go." Priya looked concerned. "Everything okay? My daughter's not feeling well." He reached for his wallet. Vanessa rose too. "Family comes first." Those 4 plain words surprised Dean more than seeing her walk through the door had. He thanked Priya for the evening. She smiled gently. "Go be with your girl." As Dean hurried toward the exit, he had the strange feeling this unusual night wasn't over. It had only just started. Dean reached his mother's house less than 15 minutes later. The fever wasn't dangerously high, but Ivy looked pale, curled up on a couch under her favorite dinosaur blanket with a cartoon playing quietly in the background. "I'm okay," Ivy insisted before he even asked. "You don't look okay. I just wanted you to come home." That small, honest sentence carried more weight than the fever itself. Dean sat with her until she drifted off, then thanked his mother, who waved off his apologies and reminded him, as always, to make sure Ivy drank plenty of water through the night. By Saturday morning, the fever had already started to break. Life slid back into its usual rhythm. Laundry, groceries, a soccer game, checking emails while pasta boiled on the stove. The dinner already felt like something half-imagined, until Sasha called Sunday afternoon. So what? Don't play dumb." Dean laughed. "It was nice. Nice is not a full report. I liked her. And my boss somehow ended up at our table." Silence. Then Sasha burst out laughing, so hard Dean had to hold the phone away from his ear. "I'll leave you alone for one dinner, and you turn it into a staff meeting." It wasn't exactly planned. Clearly, after she caught her breath, Sasha turned serious. "Priya said you left because your daughter wasn't well. She's better now, and Priya's hoping you'll call." Dean looked over at Ivy, who was busy taping together a cardboard spaceship in the living room. "I think I'd like that." Monday came faster than Dean wanted. The office looked exactly the same. Coffee cups, shipping manifests, people pretending they weren't exhausted. Only Dean felt different, unsure whether Friday night would make things awkward. At 10 o'clock, a calendar invite appeared. Meeting with Vanessa Cole. No explanation attached. His stomach tightened. He rehearsed every unfinished report in his head on the walk to her office. "Come in," she said without looking up. Her office overlooked the harbor. Everything on her desk sat in perfect rows except for one item. A small clay dish, clearly handmade, uneven and glazed a lopsided blue. Vanessa finally looked up. "How's your daughter?" The question caught him off guard. "Much better, thank you." "Good." She closed her laptop. "I wanted to apologize for something I realized on Friday." Dean waited. "I've been scheduling evening meetings without ever asking whether people could actually make them." She glanced at the little clay dish. "I assumed everyone could rearrange their lives the way I always have." That assumption wasn't fair to anyone. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then she went on. "My son made that in third-grade pottery class. I missed the class showcase because a shipment got delayed and I thought it couldn't wait." She smiled faintly. The shipment got sorted out within a day. The showcase never happened again. Dean didn't know what to say. "When you left Friday without apologizing for putting your daughter first," she continued, "it reminded me of choices I wish I'd made differently." That wasn't the conversation Dean had expected. Not even close. Instead of reviewing deadlines, they spent the next 15 minutes going through the team's schedule, marking which evening meetings could become morning check-ins or async updates instead. Nothing dramatic. No sweeping policy announcement. Just small, practical adjustments. The following weeks felt lighter. People still worked hard, but no one flinched anymore when they left on time to catch a recital or sit with a sick parent. One Thursday afternoon, Dean got a text from Priya. "Still can't keep Basil alive. Considering giving up on plants entirely." He smiled. "I'm only qualified in frozen waffles and canned soup." "Good enough," she replied almost instantly. "Dinner Saturday?" This time it wasn't a blind date. They met at a small corner cafe instead of the fancier place. Conversation flowed easily. Priya asked thoughtful questions, but never pushed when Dean wasn't ready to answer. She spoke openly about her own broken engagement, admitting that starting over in her mid-30s had felt lonelier than she'd expected. Neither of them tried to impress the other, which was probably exactly why they enjoyed each other's company so much. A month later, she met Ivy. Dean had worried the introduction would feel forced. Instead, Ivy spent 20 straight minutes explaining every step of building a proper blanket fort, while Priya listened as though it were the most important architectural briefing of the year. When Ivy finished, Priya said, "I think the pillow foundation is the strongest part." Ivy beamed. "That's what I said." On the drive home, Ivy asked quietly, "Could she come over again?" Dean smiled without taking his eyes off the road. "I hope so." Life didn't suddenly turn perfect. Ivy still missed her mother some nights. Dean still stood in the kitchen some evenings, feeling both grateful and completely drained at once. Work deadlines still piled up. The dryer still broke at the worst possible time. Bills still came every month. But something had shifted, not because life had gotten easier, but because he no longer felt like he had to carry all of it by himself. A few months after that strange dinner, the company organized a volunteer afternoon at the very youth center Vanessa had mentioned. Dean signed up along with a few coworkers. He watched his boss kneel beside a nervous 11-year-old struggling through long division, never once rushing him, never once sighing with impatience. Just waiting, the same patience she described that night at the restaurant. Driving home afterward, Dean realized how often people only knew each other through their busiest, most stretched-thin moments. He'd only known Vanessa as the executive behind the impossible emails. She'd only known him as another logistics manager trying to keep shipments on schedule. Neither had seen the fuller picture until chance sat them at the same table. A few weeks before the holidays, Sasha invited everyone over for dinner. This time, there were no surprises waiting. Just homemade chili, too much dessert, kids racing through the hallway, and adults arguing over the rules of a board game nobody remembered correctly. At one point, Sasha leaned toward Dean and whispered, "Still think setting you up was a terrible idea?" He looked across the room. Priya and Ivy were laughing over a puzzle they clearly weren't going to finish before bedtime. "No," he said, smiling. "I think it was one of your better decisions." Sasha raised an eyebrow. "I'll remind you that you almost didn't show up." "You definitely will." She laughed. "I absolutely will. Sometimes kindness doesn't arrive as some grand rescue. Sometimes it looks like a friend refusing to let someone spend another Friday night alone. Sometimes it looks like a stranger choosing to share a crowded table instead of asking someone else to give up their seat. Sometimes it's a manager willing to admit she got something wrong. And sometimes it's simply making room for one more person in your life, one ordinary day at a time. Comment: kindness still exists if you believe even one good act can change someone's life. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. Life rarely gives us perfect timing. It gives us imperfect moments, unexpected meetings, and quiet chances to treat each other with a little more understanding. More often than we realize, those small acts of kindness become the beginning of a better chapter.